Roundtable time now. George Will is off today. Glad to have Cokie Roberts here. Also, Dan Senor, senior advisor of the Romney campaign. Steve Rattner, who ran the auto bailout for President Obama at the Treasury Department. And two congressmen, Congressman Tom Cole of Oklahoma, also a member of the Republican leadership, and Keith Ellison, Democrat of Minnesota, chair of the Progressive Caucus in the House. Let's talk about what we just heard from Tim Geithner at Cokie. He says they're making progress. I think it's fair to say he's about the only one in Washington who thinks so this week.
Well, Congressman Cole does.
I want to hear that then, right?
In the green room. But it hasn't been a very encouraging week for people who think that the fiscal cliff is not something we want to go over. And I think that the president's proposal that was put on the table was something that the Republicans were not going to accept, even close to accept. So it had the air of a bazaar, you know, bargaining in a bazaar. Put a really high price out there so that when you start the negotiating, you feel like better about it.
The question is, when will the real negotiating begin?
Well,
so Congressman Cole, you actually think there was progress there, even though I think you thought...
I want to thank the President, Tim Geithner, for reuniting and re-energizing the Republican caucus, because that offer, they must think John Boehner is Santa Claus, because that's a Christmas wish list, not a real proposal. And in that sense, I think we took a little step back at the end of the week. Now, at the end of the day, do I think we'll arrive at a deal? Yeah, I actually do. But I think it's a lot of tough negotiation ahead of time.
But you heard Secretary Geithner right there, and then I want to get Congressman Ellison in on this as well. He says it is now up to the Republicans to come forward with a new proposal. They're not going to come forward with anything new right now.
Well, I don't know that there's a little bit of chicken going on here in terms of gamesmanship. The reality is all these tax rates end at the end of the year. And so we're going to have a lot of discussion. I don't think we need to put a formal proposal out on the table. The Speaker's already said revenue's on the table. He's got an idea about how to get there in terms of not raising rates, but finding it in other ways through tax code reform. I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's a doable thing. But beyond that, you know, we'll wait and see how the negotiations go.
What we heard from Secretary Geithner, Congressman Ellison, is that Social Security for now is off the table in these negotiations. But talking about significant cuts in Medicare, can your caucus accept those?
Well, it depends on whether they're going to cut benefits to people. I was meeting with seniors in my district just yesterday, and they're very worried. I mean, we have seniors who are already paying more than they can afford for medications, already worried about that. I'm not going to go to those people and tell them that they're going to do less while we're not going to raise taxes on the top 2%. That's just ridiculous. And, you know, I think Tom's right. We probably will end up with some kind of a deal, but it's not going to be on the backs of the most vulnerable people in our country. And I think that people at the top of the income scale...
So you all agree that something is going to happen. Dan Senor, that conflicts at least with a lot of the reporting I had on Capitol Hill this week, where you saw both significant numbers of Republicans and Democrats more willing to accept the idea of going over the cliff, at least for a few days.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as one Republican House member said to me, good lesson in negotiating is don't make your opening offer one of humiliation, which is what Republicans felt the White House had put forth in the last couple days. I think there is a sense now, Republicans I've spoken to, particularly in the leadership, have said, look, if we go over the cliff, we're going to get blamed. Republicans are going to get blamed.
No question about that.
The view is shifting a little bit now, where there is a sense that if President Obama goes into his second term and poisons the environment so much that he can't get a deal and we go over the cliff, it is going to be so toxic for year 2, year 3, year 4, and Republicans have some leverage too. That the president has to be worried about his legacy and how he's going to govern through his second term. And even though Republicans might get blamed, this whole idea that the president's bringing the country together is something he wasn't able to do in his first term. If he can't do it in his second term, it could be very problematic.
That is something the Democrats have to be wary of, isn't it?
But I don't see it that way at all. Look, the president has made a proposal. It may not be what everybody likes. When you go out to sell your house, you don't put on the price on it that you're actually willing to sell it on. You start at a place and you negotiate. I don't think it was an outrageous proposal. It's consistent with everything he said before. But it's a proposal. It's a real proposal. The Republicans have put no proposal on the table. Nothing. Not a zip. And so if we go over the cliff, it is not at all clear to me that the American people are going to blame the president as opposed to a party that has put nothing on the table.
This business of the blame is really dispiriting, because the idea of, who's going to get the blame instead of figuring out how to keep it from happening is exactly what drives voters nuts.
They might have to be aware of who's going to get the blame before they come to a deal. One proposal that came this week was from you, Congressman Cole, and it caused some consternation in Republican ranks from the House Speaker. You're saying accept part of the president's proposal. Pass right now an extension of the tax cuts for 98% of Americans, and then fight over the rest later. I want to show what Speaker Boehner had to say about that.
Well, I told Tom earlier in our conference meeting that I disagreed with it. You're not going to grow the economy if you raise tax rates on the top two rates. It'll hurt small businesses. It'll hurt our economy. It's why this is not the right approach.
I saw he disagreed, but I see other Republicans coming forward, including Bill Kristol, the week of Senate, think you have a good idea.
Called me a wonderful friend.
Yes.
It's nothing personal.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Everything's still
But yeah, actually, it really is. Look, this is I actually do believe that we should take things where we agree with the president, and we do agree on this, and take them off the table one at a time. And this would actually, I think, strengthen our position in the course of negotiation, because it moves us to where the president has not been very specific. Spending restraints, entitlement reforms. And it leaves us free to still fight to keep rates constant and try to reach revenue in another way, which the speakers talked about. But at the end of the day, again, these rates hit every single American at the end of the month. It's not as if Congress, has to do something to keep that from happening. It actually does have to do something to prevent us from having this type. So I think we should start
politically
doing that.
very smart move. I mean, we're talking 90.
I'm sure you're helping him in his caucus right now, but go ahead. It's okay.
Actually, I'm not so sure.
Now, if Dan will say that,
But 98% of Americans then know that their taxes are not going to go up in January. Their payroll taxes might, but that their income taxes are not. And that is huge. And the truth is, from what I'm hearing, the top 2% better start making financial plans.
Well, there's
for
no
their
question
taxes
about that.
to
But
go
why?
up.
What's wrong with this proposal?
Look, I think there are parts of the proposal that are, shall we say, reasonable. How about that? Reasonable.
I'll take it.
But I think that the bigger problem here is if the president is sticking to this position, at least for the time being, that he outlined last week. It would be the equivalent of Republicans not putting forward something like Tom put forward. It would be the equivalent of Republicans saying, we want the Ryan budget, we want marginal tax rates cut 20% across the board. I mean, some very extreme position. So it's hard to have sort of a reasonable response to what the president put forward this week. And I'll tell you, Steve, I think he is. Let me just. I think he has dug in. He spent more time on the phone this week, from what I understand, with Steve Israel, the chairman of the Democrats' campaign arm, than he did with John Boehner. He's spending time meeting with people like Richard Trumka and MoveOn.org. You tell me what he's telling those hard left groups about his position and how he can walk back to something more reasonable that someone like Tom is for, given what he's saying to these hard left groups.
He also met with quite a number of business leaders, a lot of CEOs, a lot of Republicans this week. He's trying to do something different than he's done before, which is take his message outside of the Beltway, outside of Capitol Hill, and try to bring it to the people. And I'm totally in favor of that. But look, in the negotiations a year and almost a half ago, Speaker Boehner was reported to have offered $800 billion of revenue. The president has asked for $1.6 trillion of revenue. There's a bid, there's an ask. If the Republicans want to get a deal done, let's sit down and try to find.
And let me bring that to Congressman Ellison, because we started to see the beginnings of a counteroffer this weekend from Senator Mitch McConnell, Republicans. He told the Wall Street Journal he offered three things. He said we need to see higher Medicare premiums paid by the wealthier, number one. He said he's a gradual increase in the eligibility age for Medicare and some adjustment to the Social Security COLA. I believe those are all non-starters to you in the Progressive Caucus.
Right. Those would be a problem because raising rates and increasing eligibility age is going to hurt people across income scales, particularly low-income seniors and people like that. So that wouldn't work for us.
The president's been open to some of that before.
Well, here's the deal. The people of the United States believe that Medicare is an important program. They don't want to see beneficiaries cut. Now, if we can find cuts that don't result in cuts to beneficiaries, that's one thing. But we're not going to, after having seen the president win this election, we won the White House, turn right around and undermine the people who helped put us there. I mean, it
is interesting. The older voters did vote Republican, and Medicare was out there. I mean,
and
Paul
it was
Ryan
on the budget. It was on the ballot.
Budget was there, and older voters went for.
Let's not overstate the president's
Governor
mandate
Romney.
here either. Remember, he won, but he won with fewer votes and a lower percentage than he got last time. The Republican performance was better than it was 4 years ago. And the reality is, nobody can look at this budget and think that if you don't reform entitlements, you can balance it. You could give the president every tax increase he's asked for, you'd still be in the hole.
But it's a matter of where do you balance it?
No.
Do you balance it on the backs of the people who can least afford it, or people who have been doing pretty well in the
We
last
don't balance it on the backs of the least supported, but to get a deal, we have a divided government. The president won. We can argue about whether it's a mandate. The Republicans control the House. They have a blocking position in the Senate. There's going to have to be compromise. We have $16 trillion of debt. We have $1 trillion a year deficit. You're not going to solve all that with tax increases. You're not going to solve all that with cutting discretionary programs. We have to fix the entitlement programs. There is no real choice about that.
No,
we can talk about how we do it.
Well, you got to get specific, though, Steve, because when you start talking about fixing the entitlement program, I mean, we're clear, Social Security's off the table. What do you
we're not
mean?
clear. We're not. No.
It's off the table for
What
this
Secretary
deal.
Geithner said is on a separate process, but it's going to have to get
It's off the
fixed
table in
also.
these- in these
We're talking about
It's gonna
between
have to
now
get
and
fixed
30,
also.
30 days from now.
But it's also a presidential responsibility. Look, if only Nixon can go to China, only Obama can fix entitlements. I mean, this is preeminently where a president has to lead and has to be specific. You can't expect the Republicans to lead on an area that he's dominant in politically.
Here's an entitlement idea. Here's a way to help support Medicare. Let Medicare Part D negotiate drug prices. That'll save us $157 billion.
Keith and Steve here, this is, to me, the much more interesting debate than Tom and Dan. No, because I think the president has done exactly what he's done in the past in this negotiating. He's not sitting it down, grinding out with John Boehner. He's out giving speeches, rallying his base, getting Obama for America very organized, meeting with groups like MoveOn.org. How will he be able to?
Americans.
Right. So how will he be able to walk back from the position he's taken? Will the base of your conference feel like he caved? Will they say the president just won this historic re-election? How can he walk back now, just after he's won re-election, from this position he's taken over the last week?
Because
Is he
it's a
somewhat boxed in?
negotiation.
Well, I think that he's got the wind at his back. The American people want him to stand up for these essential programs. Now, look, American people do want to see cost containment, but we can do that in ways that doesn't result in cuts to beneficiaries. I think that's
So we got two intra-party battles going on. We're going to have to take a break.